Welcome to Freedom Grows. My name is Lisa, and today I will be showing you the process of making water kefir or kefir. Some people pronounce it different ways. Water kefir is a very rich probiotic drink that's made from a sugar water mixed with kefir grains, which are a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast, very similar to like a kombucha SCOBY, but it is different. It's also similar to milk kefir, but it uses different grains. So one uses milk kefir grains, that's for the milk kefir, and another uses water kefir grains. Now, the grains are not actual grains. They are little crystal-like gelatinous structures, and they feed on sugar, or more specifically, sugar water. Now, I have a batch of sugar water with the kefir grains already here. They have started fermenting. I just started this a couple of hours ago, so I'll be checking on it tomorrow. Now, it's super good for your gut. Like I said, it is very rich in probiotics. It's also dairy-free because it doesn't use milk. It only uses sugar water. And it's also low in sugar because you're initially starting with a sugar water base. However, the kefir grains feed on the sugar. So what you're left with is a very low sugar, very high in probiotic drink. This here is a really light and refreshing option that you can actually turn into a very healthy soda if you put it through a second fermentation. So the first ferment is just basically plain kefir water. But if you proceed to do a second fermentation, what you're doing is you're introducing fruit to that second fermentation, and you're bottling it up and tightening that bottle to create a nice carbonation. And so what you're left with afterward is a very healthy soda, flavored however you'd like. So I'll walk you through that process now. I'm going to show you a first ferment and a second ferment, and we'll talk a little bit more as we go along. Just a couple of things to note. I always start with a 2-quart mason jar, but if you feel like that's too much, this is 8 cups. Now, if you feel like that's too much, especially for your first try, you can start with a quart, which will make 4 cups. So you'll just cut the recipe in half. I'm starting with a 2-quart mason jar, and I'm going to be adding a little over 7 cups of spring water to this. And then I'm going to go ahead and dissolve my sugar. Now, as far as the water goes, you'll want to use spring water or well water if you're on a well. I would steer clear of distilled water or reverse osmosis. Now, if you have reverse osmosis, that's fine, but you'll want to add a little bit of either a pinch of sea salt, or instead of raw cane sugar, you may want to do brown sugar, so that the molasses and the sea salt can add a little bit of minerals back into the water, because the kefir grains do feed on minerals in addition to just the sugar, so you want to give them a little source of minerals. So the spring water is my choice of water for this kefir water recipe. As for the sugar, you have different options. You can do raw cane sugar or brown sugar. My first batch, which when I show you the second fermentation in a minute, I used brown sugar, but for this one, I'm using just raw cane sugar with a pinch of red mint salt. You can use sea salt. I just have red mint on hand. That's my favorite salt. And for this recipe, since I'm doing 2 full quarts, I'm going to be adding half of a cup of sugar. Some people add half raw cane, half coconut sugar. You can do that as well. And then I'm also going to be adding just a little pinch of my salt, which isn't really needed, but I do want to give a little bit of mineral boost to this one since I'm not doing the brown sugar this time. But what's nice about this is you can change it up each time. So one time you can do a little pinch of sea salt with raw cane sugar, and the second time you can do just brown sugar with nothing else added. So you can mix it up. And what you'll want to do is dissolve this sugar fully in this water before you add the kefir grains. You don't want the kefir grains to have direct contact with the sugar itself. definitely want to make sure that it's fully dissolved. Some people go the extra step and dissolve their sugar in half of a cup or 1 cup of warm water, and then they let that cool down a little bit and then add that dissolved sugar water to this main jar. I did that initially, but found it wasn't necessary. The sugar dissolves pretty well if I mix it vigorously like this for about a minute or two. And now that it's fully dissolved, I'll be adding half of a cup of kefir grains to this jar. What I'll do now is give it a gentle mix and then cover it with either a cheesecloth. If you don't have a cheesecloth, you can use a kitchen towel or a coffee filter, just something breathable, but also to not allow any bugs or dust or any particles to get in. And then secure it with a rubber band, and you should be good until the next day to check on it after 24 hours or up to 48 hours, depending on the temperature in your home. If it's above 74 degrees, it'll take a shorter time to ferment. If it's below that, it will take a little longer. What you see here is a different jar. It is the first ferment that I did 24 hours ago, and it's a little darker because I used brown sugar instead of the white raw cane sugar. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a taste test to see if it's still sweet or if it's tangy. And I took off the top and I noticed that there are bubbles, so I do know that it has been doing its thing fermenting. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a try, and if it's still too sweet, I'll leave it to ferment for a little longer. Before I give it a try, I'm going to give it a gentle stir, and I'm using a wooden spoon because you want to try to avoid metals or aluminums, steels that can interfere with the kefir grains. And as you can see, some of the kefir grains float up and down. That's also normal. You want to see that. And I do have some bubble action going on. So I'm giving this a little taste. And the first thing that I'm noticing here is that it's still a little sweet, but I do find some tanginess in the background. It's just a little too sweet for my liking. So I'm going to leave it out for another 12 hours. So I'll check back in tomorrow morning. It's almost 8 p.m. right now, so I'll come back at around 8 a.m. It is the next morning, and we will go ahead and give this another try, see if it's fermented a little more. Looks like we have some good fermentation happening. I'll take my wooden spoon and give it a gentle stir. Much better. This is ready. So I'm going to go ahead and start bottling this up. I'm going to make sure that I strain the kefir grains out while I pour this into my bottles. As you can see, I'm using a mesh strainer. I'm avoiding metal because the kefir grains are going to be in direct contact with the strainer. For the second ferment, I will be adding fruit juice. You can add cut up fruit, fruit juice, or even herbs. You'll want to give it another source of sugar. This is why we're using fruit. If you're going to do herbs, or if you're using fruit that has a low sugar content, you'll want to add a little bit of sugar to the mix before you bottle it up, because this liquid is still very active and alive, and it needs to continue to feed on the sugar for the second fermentation. So I have 12-ounce bottles here, and the rule of thumb is you want to use at least half of a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon per 16-ounce bottle if you're not going to be using juice that has natural sugars already. So I'm going to be flavoring this with 2 different types of juices. The first one will be a berry grape. The second will be a natural orange juice, and the third will be vanilla. And for the vanilla, I'll be using vanilla extract, which doesn't have sugar. So I will need to add about a half teaspoon of sugar to the bottle with the vanilla extract so that I can feed the kefir water. I'll be adding about a quarter cup of juice to each bottle and then filling it with the kefir water. And I'm gonna leave a little more than an inch of headspace in this bottle so that it has enough room to do its thing and not explode on me. The bottles that you use also need to be of good quality, preferably bottles for fermenting, because if not, your bottles can explode with the pressure of the second ferment. These bottles that I have here are for kombucha. I've used these many times for my batches of kombucha in the past, so I know that they passed the test. I'll be tightening this cap pretty well. I'm just going to wait until the very end and I'll tighten all of my caps really good so that no air escapes. For the next two, I'll be flavoring them with fresh squeezed orange juice. Now I only have one orange. It's pretty big, so hopefully I have enough juice to fill both bottles. If not, I'll just be doing one. And same measurement here, a quarter cup of juice for each 12-ounce bottle. Nice. I had just enough for the two bottles, so that's great. Let me go ahead and strain some more kefir water. These grains definitely grew. Not only did they expand a bit, but they multiplied. I started with just half of a cup of kefir grains, and this right here is a good cup. I may have enough for both of these, I may not. So I'm going to just start with one. For this next one, I'll be adding vanilla extract with sugar, and the end result should taste somewhat like a cream soda. And this is half of a teaspoon of sugar dissolved into a little bit of water. And then I'll be adding the vanilla extract. For the vanilla extract, I will probably just add about a quarter teaspoon. I probably could go half. I'll just see. I'll give it a taste test before I close this top, and if I need to add another quarter teaspoon of vanilla extract, I will. Just depends on how strong the flavor is. Gently mix this and give it a little taste test. I find that it is good on vanilla. I don't think that it needs any more than that. So I'll go ahead and get this bottle closed up. And by the looks of it, I will not have enough for another bottle. So I'll just drink this, which is perfectly fine to drink now. You don't have to second ferment this at all. I'm gonna go ahead and get these closed up pretty tight. I have my 2 grape here, my 2 orange, and my vanilla. These now will sit on the counter out of direct sunlight for another 24 hours. And it's really important because these ferment a lot more vigorously than kombucha. It's good to burp these bottles, so release a little bit of air by loosening the top gently and carefully every 12 hours. So tonight I'll come back and gently release some pressure. Tomorrow morning I will do the same. If you find that the carbonation is not enough or to your liking, just close the top back up tightly and let it sit out for a little longer. Maybe try every 12 hours until you're happy with the end result. And once you're happy with that end result, you can place them in the fridge where they will stop fermenting or they will significantly slow down. After 24 hours, I went ahead and tried the orange kefir water and it tastes like an orange soda. So this is definitely ready and going in the refrigerator now. The last thing you'll need to think about is what you'll be doing with these kefir grains. You can either use them for another batch or store them in your refrigerator. Now you can store them in the refrigerator for up to 2 weeks in a cup of water with a tablespoon of cane sugar or brown sugar dissolved into that water. Just add the kefir grains in the sugar water mixture, place it in a jar, close it up, and put it in your fridge. And it's good for up to 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you'll want to make sure that you refresh that water. So strain the water, add another tablespoon into a cup of water to make sure that that's dissolved, add the grains back in there, and then place it in your refrigerator. And you just keep doing that every couple of weeks if you're not going to be using this for a longer time period. If you have a lot more grains than I do, you can just double or triple that ratio. What I'll be doing is using half of this. This is about a cup of grains, so I'll be using half of a cup for another batch, and I'll be storing the other half cup in the refrigerator. These grains are now ready to store in the refrigerator. I want to thank you for watching until the end, and I will catch you on our next video.